My sister stole my honeymoon on my wedding day. My mother helped her do it. And when they showed up at the airport expecting a free trip to paradise, they discovered that karma doesn't need years to deliver justice. Sometimes it only needs 24 hours and a bride who works in airline security. My name is Natalie Vance, and until last Saturday, I thought my family's favoritism had limits. I was wrong. There are no limits when it comes to my sister Brooke. There never have been. Let me set the scene. My wedding reception, the happiest day of my life. I'd just married Daniel Mercer, the love of my life, after 3 years of dating and a year of engagement. 200 guests filled the grand ballroom of the Harrington estate, a venue Daniel and I had saved for over 18 months. Crystal chandeliers, white roses cascading from every surface, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. My maid of honor, Jessica, my best friend since our freshman year at Georgetown, had just raised her champagne glass to give a toast. She'd prepared something beautiful. I'd heard her rehearsing it that morning, her voice catching when she talked about the day I met Daniel. That's when Brooke struck. She walked right up to the head table, her emerald green bridesmaid dress swishing against the floor. A dress I'd specifically chosen because she'd complained that pastels wash me out. Even at my wedding, I'd accommodated her preferences. She snatched the microphone from Jessica's hand mid-sentence, literally cutting off my best friend mid-word, and turned to face the crowd with that smile she's perfected over 28 years. The one that makes everyone think she's charming rather than calculating. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I have some exciting news of my own that just can't wait." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight with concern. He knew my family. He knew something terrible was about to happen. We both did. "Derek proposed this morning." Brooke squealed, holding up her left hand to display a diamond that definitely hadn't been there during the ceremony. I would have noticed. "We're engaged." Half the room applauded, either too confused or too polite to recognize the massive breach of etiquette. Announcing your engagement at someone else's wedding is listed in every etiquette guide as the number one thing you absolutely never do. But Brooke had never read an etiquette guide in her life. Rules were for other people. Derek, her boyfriend of 4 months, a man I'd met exactly twice, stood up from his table and joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist with the proud grin of someone who had no idea he was participating in a social crime. But Brooke wasn't finished. She never was. And guess what? We're leaving for Bali tomorrow morning. 2 weeks in paradise to celebrate our engagement. Bali, my honeymoon destination. Tomorrow morning, my departure date. The realization hit me like ice water. I looked at my mother, seated at the family table with my father's side of the relatives. She was beaming at Brooke with the kind of pride she'd never once, not once in 31 years, directed at me. Her golden child had struck again, and she was basking in reflected glory. And in that moment, I understood exactly what had happened. My mother had access to my honeymoon booking. I'd shared the itinerary with her months ago when she'd insisted on knowing our travel plans for safety reasons. At the time, it had seemed reasonable, even caring. Now I recognized it for what it was: reconnaissance. The confirmation emails, the flight details, the resort reservation, the login credentials I'd given her, in case of emergency. She'd given everything to Brooke. Daniel leaned over, his face pale. "Please tell me those aren't our tickets." I pulled out my phone under the table, hidden by the white linen tablecloth, and opened my airline app with trembling fingers. My heart stopped. The reservation had been modified 6 days ago. The passenger names on the tickets, originally Natalie Vance and Daniel Mercer, had been changed to Brooke Vance and Derek Sullivan. My mother had used my login credentials to steal my honeymoon and give it to my sister. On my wedding day. Here's what my family didn't know about me. I work for the Transportation Security Administration. Not as a screener at airport checkpoints. As a senior cybersecurity analyst specializing in airline fraud prevention and federal transportation security. What my mother had done wasn't just cruel, inconsiderate, and morally reprehensible. It was a federal crime. Unauthorized access to airline reservation systems. Identity fraud. Theft of services valued at over $12,000. Wire fraud for using internet systems to commit the theft. Multiple felonies wrapped up in what she probably thought was just helping Brooke get a nice trip. My mother had been dismissing my career for years. Natalie works for the government, she'd tell people vaguely, while spending 20 minutes describing Brooke's Instagram influencer business, with its 15,000 followers. She had no idea what I actually did. She'd never asked. Daniel saw my expression change from shock to something else entirely. Something cold and calculated. "What do you want to do?" he whispered. "Not here," I whispered back, forcing a smile for the guests who were watching us. "Not at our wedding. I won't give them the satisfaction of ruining this day more than they already have. But tomorrow morning, when they show up at that airport expecting to board our flight," I met his eyes. "They're going to learn exactly what happens when you commit federal fraud against someone who catches federal fraud for a living." I spent the rest of my reception smiling, dancing my first dance with Daniel, cutting cake, and pretending my heart wasn't shattered into 1,000 pieces. My sister had hijacked my wedding day and stolen my honeymoon, and my mother had masterminded the entire thing. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I waited. That night, after Daniel and I returned to our honeymoon suite at the Harrington, a room we were now using as just a regular hotel room since we apparently had nowhere to fly to, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my supervisor at the TSA, Margaret Chin. I explained the situation in clinical, professional terms and requested an official investigation into the unauthorized reservation modification. Margaret was horrified, not just as my boss, but as a woman who'd been to plenty of weddings and understood exactly how egregious this was. "We'll flag it immediately," she said. "And Natalie, I'm sorry this happened to you, but we're going to handle it." The second call was to the airline's fraud department, where I had professional contacts from years of interagency cooperation. My contact, a senior fraud investigator named William, owed me several favors from cases we'd worked together. He flagged the reservation immediately and added notes to the file that would trigger automatic alerts when anyone tried to check in. The third call was to a friend at the local FBI field office who specialized in cybercrime and wire fraud. Her name was Agent Dominique Foster, and she was very, very interested in what I had to tell her. "They used your credentials to access a federal transportation system and commit fraud," Dominique said. "That's not a misdemeanor, Natalie. That's serious federal charges. Are you sure you want to pursue this? It's your family. My family stole from me on my wedding day. They humiliated me in front of everyone I know. They committed multiple felonies and thought they'd get away with it because they've always gotten away with everything when it comes to Brooke." I took a breath. I'm done being the family doormat. I'm done being the responsible one who just accepts whatever they do. I want this handled by the book. "Then we'll handle it by the book," Dominique replied. "I'll have agents at the airport tomorrow morning." Daniel kissed my forehead when I finally put down my phone. "You okay?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I will be. Tomorrow, they're going to learn that actions have consequences. And we're going to have the best honeymoon story anyone's ever heard." The next morning, Brooke and Derek arrived at Newark International Airport at 6 a.m., Instagram ready in their matching linen travel outfits. Brooke had already posted 3 stories about their surprise engagement trip with the hashtag Bali or bust. My mother had driven them, probably planning to send them off with tearful waves and promises to FaceTime from paradise. She was probably already composing the Facebook post about her daughter's romantic getaway. I know all of this because I was watching from the TSA Operations Center, where I'd been granted special access to observe the situation unfold in real time via security cameras. They approached the check-in counter with their designer luggage. Louis Vuitton for Brooke, a knockoff for Derek, all smiles and excitement. Brooke handed over their IDs and the confirmation number she'd screenshotted from my account. The airline agent typed for a moment, frowned, typed again. Her expression shifted from professional pleasantness to confusion to something much more serious. She picked up her phone and made a quiet call. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's a hold on this reservation. I need to call my supervisor." "A hold? What kind of hold?" Brooke's voice carried across the terminal, sharp with indignation. "We have a flight to catch. We're celebrating our engagement." What happened next unfolded like a beautifully choreographed scene from a movie I'd been waiting my whole life to watch. 2 TSA officers approached the counter. Then 2 more from the opposite direction. Then a supervisor in a suit. Then, and this was the part that would eventually make the evening news, 2 FBI agents who had been waiting near the departure gates, walking with purpose toward my sister. "Brooke Vance? Derek Sullivan." Agent Foster stepped forward, badge visible. "You're being detained for questioning regarding suspected airline fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to federal transportation systems." Brooke's face went white. What? No. There's been a mistake. My mother booked this trip for us. It's a gift. Using stolen credentials from your sister's account, Agent Foster finished calmly. We're aware. Your mother is being picked up at her home as we speak. The entire terminal had stopped to watch. Passengers with phones out, recording everything. Airport security creating a perimeter. My sister, the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong, being escorted away in handcuffs while her 4-month boyfriend stood frozen in absolute shock, clearly having no idea what he'd gotten himself into. My mother was already in custody by the time Brooke reached the FBI field office. They'd picked her up at home, still in her bathrobe, still checking her phone for Brooke's Bali updates. Derek was released after 3 hours of questioning. He genuinely hadn't known the tickets were stolen, and his shock during the arrest was apparently convincing enough that the agents believed him. But Brooke and my mother spent 16 hours in federal custody before being released on their own recognizance, pending formal charges. The video of their airport detention went viral by noon. Someone had captured the entire thing. From Brooke's indignant, "We have a flight to catch," to the moment the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. By evening, it was on 3 national news programs. Bride's sister and mother arrested for stealing honeymoon, read the headline on CNN. Wedding day betrayal ends in federal charges, announced MSNBC. Influencer arrested at airport after stealing sister's honeymoon tickets, blazed across social media, complete with Brooke's tearful mugshot. My phone exploded with messages throughout the day. Family members who'd witnessed Brooke's announcement at the wedding were putting the pieces together. Friends were sending screenshots of the news coverage with messages ranging from, "Oh my God," to "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." My father, divorced from my mother for a decade, and well aware of her favoritism toward Brooke, called to say he'd never been prouder of me in his entire life. "Your grandmother would be dancing in heaven right now," he said, laughing so hard he could barely speak. She always said Brooke would get what was coming to her someday. The airline, mortified by the breach and the negative publicity, reached out with profuse apologies. They refunded my original tickets completely and upgraded Daniel and me to first-class seats on a flight departing that same afternoon. They also gave us complimentary access to their premium international lounge, a $5,000 travel credit, and a personal apology from the airline's vice president of customer relations. We left for Bali as originally planned. We just left with better seats, free champagne, and the best honeymoon story anyone had ever heard. My mother called 17 times while I was in the air. I didn't answer a single one. Brooke sent 43 text messages ranging from tearful apologies to furious accusations that I had ruined her life. I muted her and watched the clouds pass beneath us. For 2 glorious weeks, Daniel and I enjoyed the honeymoon we'd planned. We watched sunsets over rice terraces, explored ancient temples, learned to surf in crystal-clear waters, and ate our weight in satay and nasi goreng. We didn't think about my family at all. It was perfect. When we returned home, I found a letter from my mother waiting in a stack of forwarded mail. "How could you do this to your own family? Brooke might have a felony record now. My reputation is destroyed. The neighbors won't even look at me. All because you couldn't share a simple trip with your sister? You've always been jealous of Brooke, and this proves it. You've always resented how close we are. Don't contact us again. You're not welcome in this family anymore." I read it twice, then showed it to Daniel. "She still thinks she's the victim," he observed, shaking his head in disbelief. "She always will. That's who she is." I wrote back a single line. "You committed federal crimes against a federal employee. I enforce the law. If you can't tell the difference between those two things, then you're right. We shouldn't be in contact." 3 months later, Brooke accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent mark on her criminal record. My mother received similar terms. The judge noted in his ruling that their complete lack of remorse was troubling, and that only the first-time offender status had prevented actual jail time. Neither has spoken to me since. I consider that part of my wedding gift to myself. I'm told Brooke's engagement to Derek lasted exactly 11 days after the airport incident. Turns out he didn't want to marry someone with a federal fraud conviction pending. His family had concerns. Shocking, I know. Last week, my father sent me a photo from his living room. On his wall, framed prominently between his favorite fishing photo and his college diploma, was the CNN headline about the arrest. "I finally have something to show people when they ask about my daughters," his text read. One's a federal agent who catches criminals. The other is a criminal. Makes for great dinner party conversation. I laughed so hard I cried. My sister announced her engagement at my wedding. She tried to steal my honeymoon with my mother's help. She ended up on the evening news in handcuffs. And I ended up in first class to Bali with the love of my life. Some people learn that actions have consequences. My sister learned it on national television. And that's the best wedding gift I ever received.